Hey, what up, Chad? So I hear you're kind of curious about the sensors that I make and the Raspberry Pi, and maybe if you want to venture down that path yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm a person who loves data. There's a lot that, if you know how to use it, I think it's helpful. It's a great tool. But I'm also the person who has dozens of grows documented through the
Hmm.
first month,
And
and then
then
it
fall
just
off.
goes. Yeah. So when I saw your Raspberry Pi and a little bit of what it did, I was curious. So please tell me more.
Oh, absolutely. Basically, the Raspberry Pi I have set up has a operating system on it because you can install anything you want on a Raspberry Pi. It has an operating system on it called Home Assistant, and you'll see that in the upper left there.
Okay. So is that like a Linux or a Windows or a
Correct.
Apple? Okay.
It's a very customized version of a Linux.
Okay. But this is
Um,
something you can find out in the wild, right?
oh, absolutely. You go
Okay.
to homeassistant.io. You can download it very easily and install it on a Raspberry Pi. If you're a little bit more computer savvy, you can install it in a virtual machine directly on your computer. There's a lot of, you can install it on almost any device out there, which is pretty crazy.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then when you first set it up, this whole page here will end up being blank, and you get to customize exactly what you want on here um, through different either web scripts that you can copy and paste. A lot of this stuff is just copy and paste, and I'll be using a lot of different like tech lingo, but a lot of this stuff you literally just either follow a video like I'll put out or
Okay.
somebody else puts out, or even a text document, and you just copy and paste, and you can get a lot of this stuff set up very easily without any coding knowledge.
It's now I see it almost looks like the meteorologists' weather forecast. They have the cool green
Mhm.
screen behind them, and they're like over in the
Yep.
Keys today. What are you typically representing visually in that area?
This is coming in from a website called Windy, which is a website I like to use for local weather data.
Okay.
And basically, it's telling me, it's around 70 degrees in my area right now. And then
Okay.
with the sliding scale right here, this is related to humidity. So we're at a pretty low humidity right now, about 20%, 30%,
And
which
this
is
is all your
rare for
outdoor
us.
conditions right now, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not actually in the town. Okay, cool.
Yeah, these are all outdoor conditions, and I like to just have that on here so I can plan for my indoor conditions.
Yeah, yeah,
Because you might have to run an additional AC or an additional exhaust fan, or switch up your environment depending on what the local forecast looks like for the foreseeable future.
yeah. I've seen some places in Colorado where they will get like 40-degree temperature swings from one day to the next. That's
That
drastic.
that pretty much happened here. Like last week, we were 85 one day, 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the next day we were at like 50, 45, 50 degrees.
Whoa, yeah, that's havoc. In the grow room, at least.
Hmm. And that's one thing I do take advantage of being in a basement, which
Hmm.
it helps. It stays consistent more often than not in a basement because you're more underground. Everybody can't take advantage of that, but
Yeah, not out here on the West Coast. We're in earthquake territory. Nobody has
mhm.
basements.
No, you got to build it earthquake safe for sure. And this front page here I set up is just my overview page. So I end up seeing like a lot of different temperatures and humidities from different sensors in this one overview section. Along with like I do have a couple of CO2 sensors like we were talking about, one in my propagation area and then one in my bloom area.
Nice. So you're actually is it two separate devices in each
Hmm.
of the areas? Okay. But they're
Correct,
all
correct.
they're all kind of like ported or they're reported on one main interface for you.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
A lot of the sensors look exactly like this. There's a little circuit board
Hmm.
that has a little USB. Flip it the other way around. Sorry, has a little USB on the other end there, and that's how you program it and also how you power it.
Okay.
And it's real easy to program it. You can set it up right inside the Home Assistant platform there. And then this is a temperature and humidity sensor.
Okay.
And they quite easily just plug in with some wires, and it has pins right here, and you just push it in there, and you follow the directions of whoever's showing you how to do it. Or if you're knowledgeable in programming, you just make sure you write down the pins that you connected these to,
Okay.
because that's the only thing that you're going to have to input into the Home Assistant so that it knows, hey, I'm looking for a sensor over here on these pins.
Now, this might seem kind of random, but it actually goes back to working with audio and the software that we did.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of information had to come through that USB cord, and if people were using it on a hub, sometimes that would cause issues. Do you have to run your USBs directly into the computer or the main interface, or can you put the bloom room and the veg room on a hub and then bring that to your final destination?
That's the great thing about these little microchips, is that the only time you have to plug them in is for the initial programming.
Oh,
Other than that, these talk over Wi-Fi,
cool.
and you just need to plug it in for power into the USB. So any USB power bank or adapter will work, and you just plug it in, and that's the only connection that it needs. It'll talk wirelessly after that.
Awesome.
And that's the cool thing about it too, is that if you also had to update this chip, that it'll also update wirelessly. So the only time you need to plug this into the Raspberry Pi is the first time you set it up.
So you have the temperature. I'm just thinking of how you would get all of the controllers or monitoring attached to that, because you have humidity, you have temperature, and CO2 as well,
Hmm.
correct?
Correct. So this particular one I've been showing is just the humidity and temperature one. But if you wanted to, you can add another sensor onto this exact same board
Okay.
on another set of pins, and you'll have a CO2 sensor or a barometric pressure sensor or whatever sensor you're going for. Maybe you want a light sensor to see if the lights are on or off. Granted, it's not going to tell you how much PAR or photosynthetic active radiation you're getting, but it's going to tell you whether or not your lights are on.
Very helpful. Have you ever um, just seen something go off the rails visually through the data? Like
Oh,
my
absolutely.
okay, yeah, my CO2 right now. There's one plant that I swear it's a CO2 monster. Like it gets, we talked about this before, but it'll get kind of droopy when it's
Yep.
well watered, it's properly healthy, and all the other plants around it are still doing fine. But I'm like, what? It's just one strain. So yeah, I'd probably want to put it over that one.
And also having that CO2 sensor, you can, if you have multiple, that helps, but that gets expensive. But if you move that CO2 sensor around, you can go, oh yeah, this corner of my tent isn't really getting that much airflow, so the CO2 gets used up quickly.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, I need another fan to kind of blow air over there, or you can address that because you found out the issue.
It's a good point. Little pockets. I like to have temperature gauges at different levels in the tent as well for that
Hmm.
very same reason. Yeah, little microclimates.
And then, like for instance, you can see my CO2 in my propagation area right now is around 480 parts per million. Now that's pretty much ambient. That's ambient CO2.
Yep.
But you can see earlier it was down lower than that 480 parts per million. So
Interesting.
you can quite easily track, even over a longer period of time, dips and valleys of your CO2. And this is just from night and day cycles.
That's awesome. And so it's generating all of the charts and graphs for you. You don't actually have to physically enter.
Now, yeah, it does it for you.
Nice.
Uh, uh,
Nice.
it, the sensors update every 45 seconds or so.
Okay.
So, and you can make it go faster, but the faster you try to update the sensor, the more inaccurate it becomes.
Have you discovered what the plus minus is, or have had a way to test kind of the margin of error on some of these?
The CO2 sensor is like plus or minus like 1%. It's actually really dead on because it's an analog CO2 sensor. So it uses a little laser that it shoots inside of a box to analyze the air and detect the CO2 in it. And some other sensors that are more digital sensors uh, do it by a mathematical algorithm. So those can have a much crappier tolerance.
Okay, little
Um,
fragment
yeah,
errors there. Is
and
one more susceptible to humidity or moisture than the other, with digital or analog in your sensors?
I mean, they're all kind of susceptible to super high humidity. I mean, I'm talking like 100% humidity. But anything, if you end up having to spray them, more than likely it's going to live because all of these are very low voltage DC electronics. So, like, it's not on this one. On one of my other chips, there's actually a little bit of rust and from where it got wet one time, and it's still working to this day.
It's amazing.
So they're not as fragile as people tend to think, especially these chipboard things. Like you'd be like, oh, there's no case for it or nothing.
Yeah.
You're right, there is no case for it or nothing, but it's it's relatively safe. It's not going to really harm itself. The only thing the case is going to do is make it look prettier.
Yeah. Well, I remember, with PC boards back in the day, it was the electrostatic charge that you were worried about. Is that not applying anymore, or is that just old worries?
That still applies if you're dealing with like board level repairs. If you're taking a little resistor off of this board and like surface soldering and doing like very geeky, nerdy stuff, like building the board yourself,
Yeah.
then that kind of matters because all the connections are open at that point
Okay.
because you're building it. But when it's in a complete form like this, it has shunts, little pieces of electronics in there that will prevent the static from harming it, as well as it's grounded when it's plugged in.
Awesome. It's cool. A lot of the past from the audio company is coming back to me on some of these boards, and the words shunts. I'm like, I know that one. It's cool.
Exactly, you shunt some of the power.
Yeah, it's been a minute, so that's awesome.
On the temperature and humidity sensors, the variance is like within 5%, I would say. But when you first set them up, they're going to be really off. They're going to be like, oh, it's 100% humidity right here, and you're like, that's definitely not 100% humidity. So what you have to do in that case is have an additional humidity sensor, that one that just shows you it right on the screen right there. Set it in the area in which you plan to put that sensor. Let it even out and measure that humidity. And once you get that number, you can offset the number on the sensor so it matches. And then once you have that set one time, it will be correct the rest of the time.
Do you need to recalibrate it every so often, or is it just gonna keep
No,
going? Okay.
it usually just keeps going unless like you had a catastrophic failure with this circuit board, then you might have to recalibrate it. But
In normal circumstances.
yeah, in normal circumstances, it just keeps going. Once you that's why I like this system a lot. Is once you set it up, much like growing in an organic situation, once you set it up, there's a lot less work you got to do to maintain it. And then, like for instance, the other thing I have on the Raspberry Pi Home Assistant controller here is different plugs that I can control from within the interface here. So I have a dehumidifier plugged into this one, and I can turn it on and off from
So
right here.
wait a minute. You don't have a dehumidifier plugged into a 220 volt on that Raspberry Pi. How are
No,
you connecting the two to talk?
that's a great question. I like to use what are called Shelly devices. They're an Internet of Things device that came out recently, and
Okay.
you can, if you're handy with house electricity and know what you're doing, you can wire up a plug to one of these, and then you can wire up another female receptacle to it. So you can plug one into the wall and then plug a device into this, and it will be able to control the device, turn it on and off, as well as tell how much power that device is using.
Wow. Does it give you any kind of attenuation in the power? Like a fan, if you had a fan hooked up to it, can it adjust the
Oh
power
yeah,
level?
oh no, it doesn't do that. The only, if you get, there is another model called the LED or the Shelly LED model, and you can use that for dimming capabilities.
Okay.
Um, but the only other automation that this has is, you kind of see in the name here, rolling shutter, is that it can turn on and off a powerful motor, so it can do like powered blinds
Hmm.
or different home ideas like that. Make a TV come out from underneath a cabinet, kind of
Right.
thing. So I like to use these Shelly devices to control the devices in my garden, because like I said, they give you that information.
And it doesn't really add a bunch of cords either, because it's almost just
No,
like an extension cord plug that you're
yeah, it's
putting
an
to the unit.
inline extension cord, pretty much.
The secret password.
The
No.
secret password. But yeah, you can control them with it on and off. And right now, I don't have anything plugged into these on the propagation one, so it's reading 0 watts. But if we go over to the veg area, you'll see that the P4000 veg light is using 420 watts, and the XS 4000 is using around 500 watts, 491.
That's such an awesome number to have there. Do you ever see fluctuation in that as well, or have you seen like a light? Oh, this is almost at the end of its life.
Now it usually uses like the same amount of power, no matter what. Unless you go to the dimmer and turn it down, then it's going to use less power. But that's LEDs will always use the power that you're giving it until it dies, until it
Okay.
just straight dies.
And this is probably actually a good way or a good number to help you determine the math. If I'm dimming, so, let's
Hmm.
say just for round numbers, I have 1,000 par at 100%. But if I dimmed it down to 60, obviously it's round numbers right now, but that would be hard to calculate what the dimmer power is actually drawing. So that I could see that being a handy number to figure out then what your light spread really is.
Oh, absolutely. And I like to use it a lot of times when I get a new light in and they say, hey, this light uses 700 watts. I'll plug it in. I'll see. Oh, okay, yeah, it uses 702 watts. So that's within margin. I'm not going to bust their balls about 2 watts.
Right, right. That would be really interesting to try to dial in the different stages of life based off of
Hmm.
that, just seedling, clone, veg, and even the different stages of flower. If your light is stronger than what your space needs, you're always going to have it dimmed, but dang, yeah, that gives you the visual representation of where it's actually set to.
Oh, absolutely. And
Awesome.
like right now, it says unavailable. That's because that's the sensor I've been showing.
Okay. Just unplug it from the matrix. Boop.
Yep. And then what's nice about it is that I can plug it right back in. I don't have to do anything else. It'll come right back on here and just start showing me the data.
No hard restart of the whole
No hard
system.
restart, no nothing.
Huh. And this is something again, I love the technology and I'm sorry if my questions are basic, but
No,
I can
they're
like
great.
I could be out on a hike. All of a sudden, I notice, if I have Wi Fi to my cell phone, I can pull this up. I can see that the humidity's high in my room.
I
I
better
don't
kick
feel
on the
like turning around.
dehumidifier.
Yeah, turn on the DHU and keep hiking.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then with the those Shelly devices I was showing, if you get a little fancy, you can set it up to where, hey, if it's 75% humidity, turn the dehumidifier on. If it's lower than 60% humidity, turn it off.
Is that something that you just program into the software?
Hmm.
Wow, okay. A lot of people, myself included, love our AC Infinity fans just because it has that type of
Hmm.
control. That was a buying point for a lot of people. Uh, this can do that, but so much more. Just it's not limited to just the fan. It's basically anything with a plug, right?
Yeah, anything with a plug, and you can pretty much hook up any device or anything that you wanted to the Home Assistant in some way, and collect all that data and be able to control things, automated things.
And because I still like hard copies of stuff, can you print that information out and keep your binder of important information?
Oh, absolutely. Every
Nice.
so often, you can go over to this supervisor tab, and then you'll see that there's this backups right here,
Okay.
and you can make a backup, and it'll make a backup of the entire thing, including all your programming. And then underneath the file editor here, you
Mm-hmm.
can export all of your data
Okay.
as
Can
well.
you select like a date range? Like I want to
Hmm.
do either, just 1 week totally micro managed or 2 years worth condensed. And then,
Like,
I obviously it's going to be closer on the linear scale, but still you could
oh
probably
yeah.
tell on certain things when you were in flower and then compare the two.
For instance, this gives you like the last 24 hours or so.
Okay.
Um, but that's not the one. If you go to history, this is the history of all the sensors for all time,
Oh wow.
and you can sort by what sensor you want right here, and you can sort by the date and time right to the left of that. So if we wanted to go, what was the breed temp for a long period of time?
Oh wow.
Here's from 3 days ago till now.
That would be awesome. I could just see in my head right now, germination rate is something breeders always need to test and test extensively. Fresh seeds, they're usually pretty good, but every now and then maybe you have some that are hard popping. That would be
Hmm.
interesting to look back at this data and see if it varied or if there was any variance from other runs. Let's see.
Absolutely.
Temperature affected the germination. That's cool. And this is probably a super advanced feature for it, but can I, let's say I have breeding run November 2013. Can I actually take like this image and take breeding run November 2015 and overlay the two and see
Um,
them compared?
Not specifically inside the Home Assistant.
Okay.
There's, I mean, you can do that on your computer by taking the two data points and doing it on the computer itself, but the program doesn't do it now.
Yeah.
There
And
is
that's
um, another thing that's cool about this situation is that there's what's called an add-on store, and you can download all different types of community-made programs
oh wow.
that
And
may be able to assist you in doing exactly that. There's one that's called Grafana that makes really beautiful graphs and stuff, but
nice.
it
Yeah.
will, that's another thing that you have to learn because that's not an automatic thing. That's
Right.
more of I want to set up. I want to be able to take this graph and this graph and this graph and compare it.
And
So
and
you'll have to kind of set it
realistically,
up.
yeah, and realistically in my mind, yeah, I'd love to have that capability, and I know it's like a super advanced feature, but um, to have the time to be able to look and compare those two things when trying to figure it out, it's there's not a whole bunch of time in the day for that. So,
No,
yeah,
no,
again, nice to have in the back of your head, but not imperative by any means.
and like you said, if you have the time and you want to put the effort in, you can make this system do almost anything you want. But sometimes it takes a little longer than you might want to get that one feature, and it may not be worth it.
Right. So to get started, I need to go online and I buy just like a blank Raspberry Pi board.
Correct.
Uh,
I would go and get the starter kit.
oh,
It
the
comes
hub
with
and
the
everything.
Yeah, it comes with the Raspberry Pi itself. It comes with the micro SD card, which you'll need to boot the Raspberry Pi up, along with the reader, so you can put it in your computer,
And
and
that's
a
how.
case. Yeah,
Oh,
and this,
that's the pretty case. Okay,
yep,
okay.
that's the pretty case.
Okay, well, shoot, that does make it look a lot more solid. And again, just mental factor. It makes it feel safer from liquids. It just
Hmm.
looks safer. Um,
So yeah, I would get this kit here, and that'll get you started right on Home Assistant right away without having to get a bunch of different parts.
mhm.
And then if you want to get some of the sensor boards, I would go and get these sensors here. These are little Arduino
Okay.
boards that have the ESP32 on it, and as you can see there, you get three of them for like $20, so they're really not that expensive.
No.
Um, and these are the things that you'd be attaching all your sensors to
Okay.
get your sensor data back.
So I'll need the Raspberry Pi. I'll need these
These sens
boards,
these
or
boards
and then the sensor
and then the
units.
sensor units, and then the sensor units aren't too bad at all either. Um, these are the temperature humidity sensors. You get a couple of them for $14.
Oh, that's not bad at all. No.
And the most expensive sensor is the CO2 sensor, which is like, what is it, $35?
And that's, not bad considering, a lot of times those things are used in devices to save lives. So, not always the one you want to go the cheapest on.
No, and that's the thing. Like, that's pretty much that's what they can make them for, and that's how much they are.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of gosh, man. Were you ever did you ever walk into a Radio Shack?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
I loved that fucking store for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. We just God, it just reminds me of when you could actually go down and just like pick these things
Hmm.
up, or you don't have a plan for the day, so you go down and you look, you're like, it's interesting. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Put
Oh,
it all together.
absolutely. They had everything there: soldering irons, resistors, all different types of electronical parts.
Yeah.
Remote control cars, all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yep. I was always in there for those. That's awesome.
But yeah,
So
those are
really,
the three things that you absolutely need to start out with is the Raspberry Pi itself, the boards to hook the sensors to, and the sensors. And then you're up and going, at least collecting data. And then if you wanted to control things, you'd have to get some of those Shelly devices.
mhm.
Or if you wanted to, Home Assistant easily integrates into many of these smart plugs, Alexa smart plugs, all those kind of different smart plugs. So you can buy one of those as well, and you don't have to make anything, and you can integrate it right into Home Assistant.
Wow, the technology of things is kind of crazy on the home level of just all the interconnectivity. Is it, you always hear of people like hacking into the person's network through the refrigerator. Does this run any kind of risk like that? Is somebody going to hop on the Wi-Fi and find an easy way into your system?
um, there's two ways to set up a Internet of Things device, and one way is less secure than the other.
Okay.
Um, Unfortunately, if you want it to be secure all the time, you have to pay a monthly fee. It's like $15 a month, and you'll know that it's secure the whole time. And that way, you can access it from the road, and you'll know that you're not making any security holes in your network at home. The other way is you can port forward some of your own ports and um, try to monitor it yourself, but that's a lot less secure doing it that way.
Okay. And that's a just kind of almost a back of the head paranoia thing. It's not necessarily a real threat. It's anything is possible, but at the same time, it's like, why does somebody care about turning on my dehumidifier for me? But always good to ask because
Oh,
security,
absolutely.
network security is still pretty important.
Oh, absolutely. And that's another thing I would say too is no matter what you're doing with an Internet of Things device, I would not be plugging in anything that is what I would say like life or death for a human into these Internet of Things devices because A, they can be security compromised, and B, uh, these are relatively new devices. I'd say 5 6 years of Internet of Things have come really big lately, but they're still relatively new devices and they fail. So if you're plugging, I don't know why you would, but if you're plugging like a CPAP machine into
Right.
your smart outlets, I wouldn't necessarily do that because
Yep.
that's a very integral thing to keep you alive while you're sleeping. Um,
Yeah.
that's
Good.
also why I like to use the Shelly devices because they're a little bit more secure. That you don't have to hook them to a cloud or have a
Mm.
Amazon cloud or a Google cloud or anything like that, and they run off your own home Wi-Fi, so they're not reaching out to the outside world for nothing.
That
And they time sync to your network, so if they do come offline, when they come back online, they'll re hook up to the time and make sure your device is on or off or whatever state it should have been in at that time.
Now, can you do like hook up other kind of crazy devices, like for instance, like a security camera
Oh,
to this,
absolutely.
and then with the Shelly block, turn it on or turn it off? If you want to. Okay.
Oh,
Oh, I see
absolutely.
it.
I got a security
Awesome.
camera in the bedroom right now. Obviously, it's the lights aren't on right now, so it's in night vision mode.
Yeah, it's good crystal clear image too, so that's always don't get a cheap camera. Yes.
And honestly, this one was I think $45 on Amazon.
Perfect. Good price right there.
It's a
Okay.
Amcrest. Yeah, you can see it in the corner there. Amcrest camera that I got on Amazon for around $45. It does 1080p.
Nice. And how is it interfaced into the board? Like it's not hanging out like a sensor like the sensors are,
Mm-mm.
is it? Or
No, it's just a Wi-Fi camera as well. So
okay.
I'm just everything's going Wi-Fi back to this one central location to the Raspberry Pi.
That's where my brain keeps tripping up. The software that I was mentioned earlier that we worked on is you needed to have your Wi-Fi disabled for it to work most efficiently. So that seems to keep being the answer because I'm always like, well, how are we going to connect it? We need to get rid of. How are we going to do this? Okay, so Wi-Fi seems to be the answer for a lot of it,
Yeah,
which is good.
especially for like us home growers and whatnot, setting up a solution like this, you're gonna go Wi-Fi for all the sensors and everything because you're not a 10,000 square foot facility.
No.
If you were a 10,000 square foot facility, Wi-Fi would not make sense because you'd have to have a very expensive network to be able to handle this, and it just doesn't make sense. So you would make there's another device that's called a CAN bus, and that you can literally run long wires in between these sensors, and that way they're no longer communicating wirelessly. They're just directly connected to the Raspberry Pi.
Okay, like Cat 5 cables or something.
Yeah.
Okay. So that kind of made me think. This would work ideally in any of the spaces that I have. They're many, but they're small.
Hmm.
What do you seem? What do you think is kind of the capacity of this? Because again, if this, if the Wi-Fi worked, this would be an awesome commercial solution.
Oh yeah. Like I said, you can still set it up in a commercial solution. It's just there's two ways of doing it with the wires I was talking about, or there's another long range wireless protocol called LARA, LARA,
Hmm.
in which you can do much longer or bigger wireless runs. But yeah, there's r- really no hard limit to how many devices you can add to the Home Assistant. On a Raspberry Pi, I think there might be a limit of like 312.
It's a lot though.
But if you, like I was explaining earlier, install it via virtual machine onto a standard computer, that limit just goes away now, because now on a much more powerful computer, and now you can handle 4,000 devices.
Wow. Wow. I'm just picturing this in my setup. I'm okay. It's the biggest investment is the actual Raspberry Pi itself, but that's going to be
Correct.
the brain and all of the add-ons or the extensions, or if I add a new 3x3, easy. I just need the board, I need whatever sensors I want, boom, connect them
Correct.
Wi-Fi, and that tent or whatever is up and running as well. And you, again, I'm sure you can distinguish between, you have your bloom room and your veg room,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
you could do tent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if you needed.
Oh, absolutely. Like here, I got Bloom Room row B and row C.
Awesome. That's so rad. That's another
So
level of control.
you can definitely do that. And when you come into this other section of Home Assistant called ESP Home, it's an add-on. This is where you can make sure all of them are different sensors. This is where you go to also program this board.
Okay.
You'll let me get this little badge out of here. You'll go to this plus button in the bottom right, and you'll name it. You'll be like, hey, this is the veg area. This is the, tent 1, tent 2, tent 3,
Yep.
breed sensor 4, however you want to label it, and fill out your personal Wi-Fi information, and hit next with this board plugin.
Nice. Easy.
And that's
takes away
yeah,
a lot of the tech scares of some people. It's all overwhelming until you realize it's really just a couple things you need to do.
oh, absolutely. And then even if you had to dive into the code for a second and say you had to adjust your sensor because right when you get it, they're not quite calibrated. All you do is hit the edit button, and this looks like a bunch of wall of text here, but all you're concerned with is the sensor tab, sensor. And you can down here, it'll just say humidity offset 40%.
And that's your calibration to get it accurate. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
and then you
that's
just
easy.
hit save. So it looks very intimidating, but you don't have to write all this. All this is mostly written for you, and you might have to change one or two things. Like this pin right here, where it says pin GPIO 33. Like I was saying earlier, you might have to write down the pin in which you attach the sensor to. This is the one thing you have to change in this pre-assembled code for you.
Okay, so you will be in the screen, but if you had it, just spelled out as a sentence or two of instructions with a picture below, that'd be easy for me to be like, oh, okay, here it is.
Yeah, okay, yeah. My sensor, I need to change this on this one because mine's 33 instead of 45. And that's about it.
That's good. And could you, let's say you accidentally you bumped it and you hit the cursor and now there's a comma missing. Would that brick the whole system, or would there be something to alert you?
No, it will alert you. Like if I come down here and just type some random stuff and hit enter and try to do just random stuff.
Yeah.
You'll see in the upper right hand or left hand, corner, there's this red X and it's saying, hey, invalid syntax. We don't know what ASDF means. We don't know what the hell that means. So you type something wrong.
Cool. Good. Yeah, there's, writing websites, the code for websites, the checkers are so invaluable because literally sometimes it's just a missing comma and the whole thing bricks.
A missing comma or a colon or some little symbol that you missed.
Yeah,
but it'll tell you in the upper
this
left
doesn't
hand.
let you do it.
Yeah, it'll just say, hey, this isn't gonna work, so we're not gonna do it.
Nice. That's Chad proof. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very hard to brick a device on one of these.
Okay.
The only thing that will brick one of these is if you're programming it, you have it plugged in and you're programming it, and you unplug it while it's being programmed. That's about the only thing that will brick one of these.
Yeah, yeah. Make sure to properly eject your hard drive, people. Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, again, back to the audio. People would lose information when they don't eject it properly, and then they call me and wonder where their stuff is.
Mm-hmm. No, you should have hit safely remove.
How I do that. Okay. that was our famous quote. How I do that. Okay. Oh, shoot.
And then, like, the only other one I haven't shown is my little dry tent area. And it just has one sensor in there that I just have, keeping track.
That's awesome. That's another freaking great use that didn't even cross my mind yet.
And then you can get real fancy with it too. And if you wanted to set up automations, it can know when your phone attaches to your home network. So it can automatically turn on your bedroom lights when you get home. It can automatically, make sure the reservoir is filled if you have that set up. It can do some automatic things just when you show up to your house with your phone.
Wow.
So it can get pretty in depth on what you can and can't do on the Home Assistant.
My mad brain just went to, you mentioned fill the reservoir. In a hydroponic system, theoretically, you could actually attach this or use this like a fertigation method if you had your different, well, depending on the system that you're growing in. But if you were, adding top feedings, liquid dressing, synthetics, I'll say it, you could actually control the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that go into the overall mix, and then that mix is dispersed throughout your reservoir. Is that
absolutely.
something that you can, oh wow, that's
you can
huge...
actually get down that path. Yeah, there's diaphragm pumps in which a lot of those already made fertigation techniques use, and you can get those diaphragm pumps for, I don't know, like $30 or $40, and hook it up. And the way it's a little more in depth, but once you hook it up, you have to set up the pump to whatever nutrient you want and run it into a beaker, so you can measure how much is coming out of that pump. And you go, I'm going to run this pump for 5 seconds, see how much fertilizer comes out, and go, okay, this pump is 10 milliliter per 5 second pump. And then you can program that into the Home Assistant and go, I need to run pump A for 3 seconds, pump B for 4, and pump C for 9 to make my fertigation solution.
Wow, that really opens the doors to fully automated home grows. Like, don't even need to be there. Fully automated.
Yeah. You can definitely work up to that for sure. And, like, that's what's also great about this system is that you can start off with just so small with just getting the Raspberry Pi and some sensors and start collecting data. And then once you learn a little bit more about the system and working with it, you can be like, well, I want to add this. Well, I want to add that. Yeah. And you can just continually add on to the system. And once you got everything that you want, fertigation control, light control, humidifier and dehumidifier control, pretty much everything in your garden on this system, you're like, oh, I'm pretty well automated. Holy shit.
So it sounds like a Tesla garden, something of the dreams. And again, there's just a lot of people, limited mobility, or maybe they can't do it themselves, or just the whole process is too overwhelming. A knowledgeable person like yourself can sit there and really guide a person through, or make it possible that they're able to grow their own medicine.
Oh, absolutely.
Using a system like that. That's very cool. Very cool.
And I'd say with all the sensors I have and the CO2 sensors and the controls that I have, I spent maybe $250, $270.
Okay.
So for somebody setting up a tent or a couple of tents, you could probably cut that in half.
Yeah, well, yeah, because you have a lot of sensors, but again, to me, it just seems like it's just the initial, the cost is up front, and then
Hmm.
it's just little pieces here and there that you can
20
keep
bucks here,
adding.
30 bucks there. Yep.
Yeah, and what what grower doesn't do that? You're like, ooh, it's a new pair of
Oh, a new
scissors,
thing.
or
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. $20, drop it. Yeah.
absolutely. Like, and I know like this is more of an overview for a lot of people out there watching, but if you wanted to have a more in-depth way of following how to set this up, I am starting a second channel called Goblin's World. That's going to go over a little bit more of this technical kind of stuff, and I'll have a video coming out quite shortly on how to install Home Assistant on the Raspberry Pi and how to set up these sensors and make sure that you have the pins correct and how to program them using ESP Home.
Well, I know you're gonna have at least one thumb up on that video. Because I will definitely be watching it. I love how you break things down, and again, this is another one of those subjects where it seems really complicated until you get the right person to explain it, and then it just
Yeah.
makes sense. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely, and I just want to say a big shout out to the Hass IO team or Home Assistant team for being able to make this so approachable for people as well. Because I know when the project first started, it wasn't nearly as approachable as it is now. You had to do a lot. You had to understand a lot more about computers and how to install things than you do now. There's just so much more automation to it for them working on the operating system over the years that they definitely made it quite easier for a lot of people to enjoy the benefits of having a system like this.
A lot more user friendly, definitely,
Hmm.
than the last time I talked or looked about like the Raspberry Pis, and then again the coding. It doesn't allow you to really break it. Um, there's a lot more user friendly.
Oh, absolutely. Like you could install Raspbian, which is another operating system, in which you would have to code literally everything for these sensors, and then have to know quite a bit more about the technology, which is really great if you're trying to learn that stuff. If you're trying to become an embedded electronics technician, if you're trying to do those type of things, is great practice, um, and a great way to learn. But if you're just trying to be a grower like a lot of us and just trying to
Yeah.
have some sensors, the Home Assistant made it a ton easier.
And that's what we're after, and that's what I'm after. Yeah, at the very beginning, I said I love data, but I'm horrible at collecting it, and something like this kind of fits what I envision in my head of how I would want it collected and how I'd want it represented, and then the ability to look back at it. Because, again, sometimes those little connections of like, why are my winter crops always like the more
Better.
terpiest? Yeah,
Yeah.
why? And then you look back,
Oh,
temperature and humidity,
temperature's
they're
down a
different.
little bit, humidity's down a little bit. I'm not trying to fight it the whole time. That's why. Okay.
Right, too. And oh my god, now I'd probably wind up cross referencing it with my power bills, too. Oh, so many avenues you could go with this information.
Oh, absolutely. And that, like, I haven't quite ventured into it myself, but they have this. Let me add this back on here. They have this energy tab that is brand new to the Home Assistant, in which if you have your mains home power being monitored by some kind of smart device, it'll put that information in here and it'll tell you, hey, during the day you use X amount of power, at night you use less power, and it'll keep all that data as well. And then if you're an alternative power geek as well, you can set up a solar power system, and it will tell you, hey, your batteries are X charged. You use this much battery during the day. All that kind of information. It can get very in depth.
I'd love to talk to the person that did follow through with that experiment of exactly how large of a solar panel do I need to power equipment for a 4x4 tent. Like, what is the true cost of that? And we know over time it'll probably pay for itself, but this is a method of getting to that, because I've always been curious. In my, I've I'm waiting for a license. A license would be nice in this
Hmm.
world to grow where I'm at. But I have, like the building spec'd out. I have everything how I want it. But one of the things is the county next to me. It's actually easy to get wind turbines,
Nice.
which usually isn't.
No, a
Um,
lot of people are like, oh, I don't like how they look.
Yep. How they look, and so there's all kinds of, like, you have to have X amount of height, X amount of blade length, X amount of space around it, based off of it. The county next to me makes it very easy, and being by the ocean, you're not going to have solar power, but the wind power is is always there.
Hmm.
So I've run my rough estimates on that to kind of figure out what would I need to power a small facility. But again, same train of thought. I would love to do something here in my house if I knew what that number was. If I knew I needed to generate this much power and this size of unit could do it, then
I
hey,
did.
why not do solar?
Oh yeah, I did kind of figure it out one time. This was probably about 2 or 3 years ago. And solar has come down since then,
Yep.
but um, I think it was around $8,000 or $10,000 for a complete system that would be able to completely run a 4x4, including the fans, the lights, and
Okay.
whatnot.
Okay. So that sounds a little bit pricey for a 4x4 unit. Not that the number's not accurate. I'm just saying, would I spend
Yeah,
$10,000 to run my 4x4? Um, eh, probably
and
not, but
the
it
big
all
cost is the
scales.
batteries. Whenever you're getting a solar system, the big cost is the batteries. The You can get solar panels that are 200-watt panels um, relatively cheaply, like 50 or $80. So,
Wow.
you get 5 or 6 of those, it's not that expensive. But when you go, I need batteries, that's when it's like, oh, well, that's like 5,000 for the batteries that you want.
There's
It's like,
always
oh,
there.
shit.
It's always something. The printer's cheap, but the ink is fortune.
Hmm. And that's the bane of humanity right now is power storage. We can't store it. We have to make it and use it pretty much right away. We can't really store it that well.
Yeah, yeah. That's an excellent point.
But yeah, I mean, thanks for coming by and checking out the
Hmm.
Raspberry Pi system, man. It's always nice chatting with you, especially when you got somebody has, really great questions.
Thank
It's
you.
thought-provoking questions that lead you on some, you know, good thought experiments.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you actually taking the time to explain more of it to me, because I know I had approached you. I'm curious. This is something that I would see myself using. And again, the ability to grow it out as I grow. I love
Hmm.
modular type of units. It's a great way to go about things. So, yeah, dude, thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much. And
Oh,
I
not a
will be
problem.
I'll be watching that video on the what was the new channel that you were gonna put this information up on?
That's going to be over there on Goblin's World. You should be able to search it. It'll also be in the link in the description, as
Awesome.
well as if you're on my channel, it'll be in the upper right-hand corner where you can see the links to other channels.
Awesome. Okay, good deal. I'll keep my eye on out for that one for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I'm gonna be putting a lot of different content on there pertaining more to like technological stuff or fixing things or stuff like that. Not
Good.
necessarily directly related to cannabis, but it may be indirectly related to cannabis.
Hey, man, expand your mind. You never know where you're going to use things or
Oh,
how you're going to
absolutely.
use them.
Absolutely. It's always good to venture out and do a few things. We all love growing, we all love cannabis, but it can't be the only thing.
Yeah, yeah. Very true, man. Very true. Oh, well, cool, man. Thank you. Thank you again. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, and have a good one, Chad. We'll see you on the next one.
Peace.